Okay, we are recording. Paul Kelly, how are you today?
Very good, thanks. How are you,
I'm all
Stu?
right. I'm all right, thank you, mate. Appreciate your time today. Where are you right now?
I'm in Melbourne, where I'm at home, where I live, Melbourne, St Kilda, down by the beach.
Fantastic, fantastic. I imagine it's a lot
Where
warmer where
where are
you are.
you?
I'm about 20 minutes outside of London, and
Uh-huh.
it's a grey, overcast morning. So yeah, no expectation from you, Paul, but I want you to cast a ray of sunshine over me for the next hour, mate. Talking some good chat about music, mate.
Oh, I'll do my best.
Top man. Paul, I'm going to ask you to kick off your playlist, and I always do that by asking guests to tell me the song that they regard as having the greatest ever intro, please.
Well, it's a very hard list to narrow down to one, but this week I'll go with the Israelites by Desmond Decker.
What
I
a
just
record!
love, yeah. Um, it starts with a vocal. The little da da the little sort of semitone push on the guitar, um, and then the sort of little build up, and the band comes in, um, and those great opening lines. Wake up every morning praying for bread, so that every mouth can be fed. And I just remember it as something I heard many years ago without even knowing what it was about or anything about the song, but just sort of been electrified by it.
Paul, when you approach writing songs and I guess sort of leaning it more in towards the sort of the intros of how you construct an intro. When you first started making music, as the way that you approach it, has it changed in like the way that people listen to music now? So much more of it is on streaming services and things where there's constant distractions where you might like this, you might like this. Whereas when you first started making music, it was very much more people went and bought a record and they listened to the album as a whole piece of art. Whereas now people seem to be cherry picking tracks on, on different listening platforms. I just wonder if any of these changes have in any way affected how you approach creating music as an artist.
Not so much over 40 years of writing songs and recording songs because I've always liked concision. I've always liked to sort of jump into things straight away. So um, generally, I like to cut to the chase pretty quickly with songs. I like to. Um, I mean, there are certain songs might need a longer introduction, or you just take your time getting into the song. But um, I like getting into songs, you know, pretty quickly. I like wherever I can see spaces to, you know, cut. I never feel like I'm making a record unless I've cut something. Often we record and then, then we sort of get into the mixing and then think, well, do we need to have that extra bar there? Let's cut it. You know, I'm not just talking about Pro Tools and modern recording, but we used to do that with 2-inch tape as well. And I always sort of felt you're never making a record until you've cut some tape. I know that's an old-fashioned phrase now, but um, uh, it's the same as for me. Writing is a whole lot. Writing is editing. Editing is writing. You write stuff, then you edit. So I have that approach to recording as well. And if you can um, get into the song pretty quick, I mean, a great intro. Sometimes you have an intro that needs its own sort of space and length, but um, uh, yeah, get into the song.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I guess I suppose labels historically would listen to a single and go, look, a radio edit would be constructed as well to try and get on, radio. Was that something that you would always sort of lean into? And was you, if that was the case, was you comfortable in having your music tweaked to get it right, to get the radio edit. Was you are you how precious were you with that, if at all?
I'm not that precious. No, I've done many radio edits over the years that um, um, yeah, I'm not that precious about, oh, the song has to be just like this, or this particular recording of the
Yeah,
song has to be just as it is. Um, I'm happy with different versions of the songs been out there. Um, Sometimes, some people like to luxuriate in a longer version of the song, and those people will like that. But I think sometimes just go bang bang, cut out all the flab, get do the song short as you can, and then I mean I sort of um I mean I love poetry and I love telling stories, but also I love pop music, and I love that sort of discipline of making things as short, as concise as you can. Um, so I'm really happy to do that. Um, I get, and as I've got older, more and more I like to write shorter songs.
yeah,
If I ever write a song and we get into the studio with the band and we recording and we come in under 3 minutes, we all jump up and down and go, yeah, great, it's under 3 minutes. So JJ Cale is sort of a great example for me of that. His songs sound so complete, and then you look at them and like, well, that was 157. Oh, that was 231.
yeah.
So um, after midnight, that he's. Uh, I think it's great if you can get a song working and feel completely full and be under 3 minutes. You know, it's sort of something I aspire to.
Fantastic. I think like I was watching a documentary at the weekend, Paul, and on that doc, it was a documentary about Motown, and just listening to Berry Gordy just making these 2.5 minute pop nuggets of gold, and it was like, right, we just wanted to start with the chorus. We wanted to like just instantly pull them in and just try and keep them songs so concise, no fat on them whatsoever, and just create these perfect little pop songs. And I guess even like all the early Beatles stuff was all under like 2.5 minutes. All the first Beatles stuff was so short, concise, and no fat on it whatsoever. I think when it sort of things got into the sort of the mid 60s and into the 70s that things started to get more expansive and change somewhat. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I mean, "Somewhere in the City" by the Loving Spoonful was like that's a perfect example
Yeah,
for me of a pop. They've got so many elements in that. The chorus, the pre-chorus, the little soundscape with horns and the instrumental, and they've got 5 or 6 different elements in that song, and they bring it in somewhere. If I remember, somewhere close to 2 minutes,
yeah,
and it's like it's a complete symphony, but they've done it
yeah.
really concisely. So I love that. If I can ever, that's something to aspire to. But then I also like songs that stretch out.
Yeah.
Sad Eyed Lady of the Lowlands. Which I listened to as a teenager, and it was like one side of a record.
Yeah, yeah,
15-minute more song. So they've got their place as well. But
yeah.
I've I do like both.
Well, you mentioned there as listening to music as a teenager, so we're going to sort of go back a little bit now. And for track two, Paul, I'm going to ask you to tell me the first song you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you, please.
Well, again, with every question that you've asked on this, I've struggled to just name one. I mean, probably the first song I can remember on the radio that sort of smacked me between the eyes was the Battle of New Orleans by Johnny Horton. With the fired their guns and the British kept it coming. Wasn't quite as many as it was a while ago. Um, but that was sort of I don't know if that was more excitement than an emotion. So I decided on Early Morning Rain by Peter, Paul and Mary.
Yeah,
Um, it was my I was influenced a lot by my elder brothers and sisters who brought music into the house. I'm number 5 out of 8. So my sisters and my two older sisters and two older brothers that in the early '60s came in with music, and there was Peter, Paul, and Mary was a big one, especially with my sisters.
Mm.
My second elder sister taught me my first chords on guitar to "I'm in Love with the Big Blue Frog," Peter, Paul, and Mary song. They've come in handy ever since, those chords. But I remember specifically "Early Morning Rain"
Yeah.
by Peter, Paul, and Mary. It was um, just had a feeling about it. I probably didn't, you know, I would have been 6 or 7. Just gave me a warm feeling.
In retrospect, looking back now, if you could sort of pinpoint what that emotion was, looking back at it now, what do you think it was?
It had a longing about it, which I wouldn't might have recognized at the time. Um, it had it was visual, and I know a lot of my songs tend towards the visual. I'm a visual songwriter, like Lou Reed or like Chuck Berry or like um, Ray Davies. Uh, I like to write songs that where you can see them as well as hear them.
Yeah.
So I think that was probably without knowing. I can't remember. I don't remember much about being 6 or 7 years old, but I can remember that feeling that song gave me.
Yeah.
That was like, oh, it felt beautiful. It felt a little sad, um, but um, yeah, it just sort of hit me. You can't really explain these things.
You mentioned being exposed to music from your siblings and your sister showing you guitar chords. So home was a pretty musical environment.
Yeah, it was. Mum and dad both loved music. Mum played music. She sang, and she played piano. And we all had piano lessons as kids. This is in the '60s. It wasn't like, oh, do you want to learn? Do you want to learn an instrument? No, it was like you're going to learn have piano lessons. It was like that's what you do. So we didn't have a choice about it. And we had a teacher, Mrs. Seacamp, that came over every Wednesday or Thursday, I think, and then she did a few of us in a row. Had to fix her up a glass of milk with a shot of brandy in it actually, to get her through, and she was quite strict. We did our piano lessons. Um, I did them for a couple of years, and I switched to trumpet, but that's going to have more bearing on my next choice. So I'll
Oh,
just hold
okay.
hold that for now.
Well, let's move on to that then, because for track 3, I'm going to ask you to tell me about the song that soundtracked your years at school, please, Paul.
Well, I've chosen "The Lonely Bull" by Herb Alpert. Um, as I said, I learned piano for a couple of years, and then my my second elder sister had a boyfriend who played trumpet, and uh, and I was quite impressed with him. He brought over some things. Um, he brought over Louis Armstrong's Hot 5 early recordings of Louis Armstrong, also Kenny Ball and Al Hurt. Um, and then I just moved from primary school to high school, yeah, here in Australia. So that was like the age of 12, starting high school. And my school had just started a brass program where they've got a teacher in to teach all kinds of brass instruments. So I went to my parents and said, can I learn trumpet? I want to learn the trumpet because I thought, trumpet's pretty cool. Um, and then after a long sort of talk about, you can't just, if we're going to get you a trumpet or rent you a trumpet for the school, you can't just like do it for a little while and then stop. You got to stick with it. So okay. So I started the first year high school trumpet, and I did go through for the next 5 years. But pretty soon after I started the trumpet lessons, my mother brought Herb Alpert's greatest hits into the house, and I sort of fell hard for that. And remember listening to um, all the Mame and El Lobo but the Lonely Bull was a big one. It had that because it had the crowd noises. I remember lying in the dark and playing that record and imagining that it was me playing the trumpet to the cheering crowds. So that was probably my first sort of thought about oh um, being a performer or somehow sort of being loved by wider a wider wider amount of people than my family and friends. So
With sorry,
so
Paul,
yeah,
carry on.
the Lonely Bull.
So with what you just said there, um, wanting to be appreciated, by a wider audience, you know, being, playing music at that age, did a career in music at that point feel like something that was a real possibility, or was there, right, I need to get a different, I need to get a job, I need to do this, or was music the focus, and did it feel like it was a real possibility that you could do that as a career?
It didn't it didn't sort of crystallize into sort of um, it must have been there early because I remember having those sort of lying in the dark and listening to the Lonely Bull and imagining the crowd and being playing in front of a crowd at the trumpet or whatever. So I remember those feelings, but it's a long time ago and it's kind of vague. And then later on in my um, as I got into my teens and um, finishing school and I started writing poetry as like a lot of people do when they're 15, 16. I think a lot of people write poetry or they write their thoughts.
You got to put that teen angst
Um,
somewhere, haven't you?
so like everybody else or like most people, I did that. And then but I sort of kept going with that. So when I first left school, um, I, I finished the trumpet and all that stuff, and I was just I wanted to travel. I was, reading Kerouac and Henry Miller and um, um, Herman Hesse, all that stuff. And I was traveling. I wanted to experience the world. In those days, 72, I just left school. I didn't have money to get overseas like my children do. Or the younger generation do. They can go overseas so easily. But it was like way too much money to somehow get travel overseas. So I travelled around Australia a couple of years, and I was sort of writing. Um, sort of, I was writing in a notebook, poetry, prose, sort of just journal entries, that kind of thing. So and I wanted to be a writer, so I was um, more in the prose poems type of things. Paris Spleen by Charles Baudelaire was an influence, um, which is the book about where he wrote sort of prose poetry. And then obviously his real poetry, The Flowers of Evil, Rambo, people like that. And then it wasn't until I was 21 that I actually started, I wrote a song on guitar. Um, and then I thought, oh, I wrote one. And I thought, oh, if I can write one, I can write some more. So I kicked off from there. Um, um, so, yeah, so it must have been early on in the early teens. It was dream of being a performer. Then it sort of morphed into being a writer. And then after a while, I figured out I can be a writer and a performer. And that was through song.
Paul, for the next track, can you tell me the first record you remember buying from a record shop, please?
Well, I'm not lucky with this one. It's like Dusty in Memphis. I mean, what a record.
Normally,
Um,
people's first records are really embarrassing ones. You've got a really good one.
yeah, I know. Um, uh, yeah, I think I would have because I didn't, I didn't. Again, there was like music coming from my siblings, and there was, um, there was, but I wasn't even on a budget to buy records, but I was hearing Pink Floyd. My brother's music was Pink Floyd, Moody Blues, Jethro Tull, all that. So I guess the, that prog rock. When was that? Late '60s, early '70s. Um, Somehow I must have heard maybe "Son of a Preacher Man" or something. And I thought, I'll maybe I should go and buy this record. Um, and uh, and I think I may, again, it's hard to remember, but I must have been aware of Dusty Springfield before that, with her, the hits that she had before then. But I remember just a little loving early in the morning. Um,
What a
that was
voice.
just yeah, what a voice. No, not mine, hers. breakfast breakfast in bed. I probably didn't even quite understand that at the time. I would have been, no, I would have understood it by then. I'd left school and I was probably, or maybe in my last. I think it was my last year of school. I would have bought records. I also brought, Chunga's Revenge by um, Frank Zappa, because Hot Rats was the big record at school at that time. Um, and it was all the cool kids were listening to Hot Rats by Frank Zappa. But somehow I found Dusty in Memphis, and then um, uh, you know over time, that record just stayed with me forever. I just
Yeah.
think it's just one of the greatest records.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, yeah, she's magnificent and a voice that just breaks you in two. It is ridiculous, her voice. Absolutely stunning. Well, I'm going to ask you for your next track, and for that, I'm going to ask you to tell me about the song that soundtracked your years in the clubs and bars.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how well known it might be over where you are, but a song called Eagle Rock by Daddy Cool. It sort of came out, I think, early '72. This is the time of music festivals starting up, and music festivals here. Um, Big festival called Sunbury, the Sunbury Music Festival in Melbourne, the Maiponga Music Festival in Adelaide. But this song, Eagle Rock, came out. Daddy Cool. That they were like, it was just like everywhere on the radio. That time when there's just a few radio stations and they were all playing it. Daddy Cool with another song called "Come Back Again," which I think was the song before Eagle Rock. Um, it was just sort of everywhere in the air, and it's classic. Eagle Rock's got this classic guitar riff. It's um, it's just sort of it's almost throwaway words, but they're great. Um, their guitar player Ross Hannaford was just one of my favourite guitar players of all time. Um, he's no longer with us, but he his legacy's there, all that Daddy Cool stuff. And he had a band called Diana Kiss that played at the Esplanade Hotel, which is down the road from my place, on Monday nights for 11 years. And you could just, I always sort of was amazed that I lived in this city where I could wander down to the Esplanade Hotel on a Monday night and hear this great guitar player playing, with with a loose shifting cast of people. And he wasn't like, a shredder or a fancy guitar player. He was just like deep in the groove, and he was the signature sound of that band, Daddy Cool, and um, yeah, his music's always with me, and not to mention, Ross Wilson, the lead singer, who had the best falsetto, uh, one of the best falsettos you could hear. They were sort of heavily influenced by 50s American 50s doo wop. But they made their own thing, carved their own style, and uh, yeah, never get sick of hearing that song. I have heard it so many times, and I never have to play it at home because you just sort of it'll always come up. You hear it somewhere.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your sort of formative years of getting out and playing and traveling around Australia and playing the what we call in London the sort of toilet circuit we call it, which is that sort of entry level venues like all the small bars and clubs where you really kind of find your feet and hone your craft. Like, tell me about those sort of formative years of traveling around and playing.
Well, that sort of really kicked in for me. I mean, I started writing songs in around '72, and um, then I sort of stopped for a bit and didn't know whether I could continue. I stalled for a while. Eventually, I moved to Melbourne in '77, and then there was that everything was kicking off. Then a lot of bands, punk was big. The big records were the Talking Heads' first record and Sex Pistols' first record, and the Damned and the Clash. I sort of it's the Talking Heads and the Clash were probably what I gravitated towards too. I love the Clash. Um, I started playing in bands, and we would play. Yeah, they were like these venues around Melbourne, three or four hundred. Um, but they were, you could play 6 nights a week and get a crowd. And then further out in the suburbs, there were bigger venues, called like bigger pubs, and they would you could fit 600 or 700 out there. Not that we ever filled them up, but they were giving us gigs, so um, we could play a lot. We weren't making much money, but we could play enough every night to pay everyone,
Mhm.
pay the mixer, pay ourselves, um, and just learn learn how to play songs, how to be in a band, how to how to um, work with an audience, all that stuff. You just which you can't teach unless you go out and do it.
Yeah. Do you think that is still the case now? Like that, bands, you need to go out and cut your teeth and get good playing, them small shows and, really sort of bond as a band and get tight doing that because when I was making music, it felt like that's such an important part of it. Do you still think that applies to this day?
Oh, I think it's important, and I think it's um, uh, really valuable to do. But I think it's sort of probably back when I started, it was sort of the only pathway. But I think
True.
there are more pathways now. You can, um, make great music and get it to an audience without building up that going out and playing live every night. So, and um, you know, it's just because I came up that way, so I'm used to that way. But I don't think it's the only way.
Yeah.
There's plenty of ways to make great music. Just um, if you're if you know how to if you've got tools that work for you and that you're
Yeah.
familiar with. I mean, you might say, oh, well, they never went out. This band or this act or this artist, they never went out and played in small grotty venues, but you, you know, I can assure you, they spent hours and hours and hours,
Mhm.
whether working, working out how to make music on their computers and drum machines all the different ways. So it's all. I mean, I spent my, what they say, 10,000 hours to get good at what you're
Yeah,
doing. I would have spent them in a lot of that in pubs and clubs,
yeah,
small venues, but a lot of other people do it, spend it, get their 10,000 hours
yeah.
other ways, even if it's in their bedroom.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to ask you for track six, and that I'm going to ask you to tell me a favourite song from your home country, please.
My Island Home by Warumpi Band, that would have started in the 70s. Um, they were a, a unique band in that they had a mix of indigenous members and white fellas. As we say here, black fellas and white fellas. They were a mixed band. Um, they started off in Central Australia, um, but they had members from up north. The the lead singer was a very charismatic person, George, um, who had a lot of James Brown moves. I think they had the first single in Australia that was sung um, in in Indigenous language. There's a song called um, a song about getting out of jail. So um, they um, so they're pretty active in the 70s and 80s. But My Island Home was recorded, I think, sometime in the 70s, and that was um, a song which is set in Arnhem Land, which is like the northeast of Australia, up from the west of Darwin, east of Darwin, between Darwin um, and the east coast. Um, a number of Aboriginal communities around that area, um, and they sort of got together down south in Alice Springs, so that they had sort of members from all over the place. But My Island Home is a song written by Neil Murray um, for George, the lead singer, to sing about his place, which is um, um, an island off Arnhem Land. So the lyrics about salt. I come from the saltwater people, um, and then but now then he says, now I'm down here west of Alice Springs. Alice Springs is sort of pretty much in the center of the country, about 1,000 or more miles away from where George grew up. So it's a song for George. He's singing about my island home, this little island in Arnhem Land, um, and he's in Alice Springs, far away from his home. Um, that song became popular through another Indigenous singer, Christian Anu, who did a more commercial version of it, and then was taken up by the 2000 Olympics, and she sung it. She sung it at the 2000 Olympics. So when she sang My Island Home, it sort of represented Australia as an island. So it's taking from the original song was about this little island where George grew up, and then I guess what's word cynic dote. Is that the right word? Cynic dote, where one thing represents another.
Yeah.
So I hope I got that right. uh, but the song became sort of widely popular as a sort of representing Australia as an island.
Yeah.
Um, but musically, what I love about this song, I mean, the recording, the recording's pretty kind of pretty rough, um, but the way it builds, there's a bridge in the evening that the winds blow. Just something about I've always found it very emotional the way the chords change in that song. Again, I can't really explain why, but and then he sings about standing in the boat with a spear, looking, with Turtle Spear. Um, but as the song goes on, it builds. It starts off pretty sort of acoustic and all those chorus guitars that were emblematic of the time, and then you hear the drums come in, and then as the song goes on, then the drums come in more, and it's just got this beautiful architecture, the whole song. Um, and song I've played it, I've learnt it, I played it here and there. I played it with them, with that band, Warumpi band, way back. George is no longer with us, um, but it's just I find it a very emotional song.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, what's your last track? And I'm going to ask you to tell the listeners of this show a song that you think many may not know that you would like them to hear, please.
Now I didn't know what you meant. Was that one of mine or by anyone?
By anyone, but I'll tell you what, we can load this one, so you can turn them onto one from yourself, and then we'll get onto it. So so you can do both.
All right. Well, I'll just choose a song of mine called Petrichor. Um, Maybe just because that needs a little explanation for overseas listeners. Petrichor is a word that means the smell of rain after it's been dry for a long time, hot and dry for a long time. So that smell after a long hot spell when rain comes, and then the earth, or it can be city streets sometimes, or it can be the earth, um, or gives up all its flavors from the rain. So uh, I won't say much more about that. Uh, and I'll go on to. So it's said to say that petrichor was a term um, made up by two Australian scientists who worked for the CSIRO, which is the Commonwealth Scientific Institute of Research organisation. So um, I thought it was quite apt that two Australian scientists came up with that name.
Yeah,
Petra from rock, and core, ichor, which means essence. So it's a meaning sort of the vapor or essence that rises up from rocks after rain hitting
I
hot
love that.
ground. Yeah, beautiful word.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
um, and so, yeah, but let's go on to Katie Cruel by
Okay.
Karen Dalton, which is just, I can still remember the first time I heard this song. I thought, oh my God, it's just her voice, the tune, which sounds so, well, it is ancient. I mean, it comes from, it's an old folk song going back, I think, 100 or no more, a couple of 100 years to the Napoleonic Wars, um, and evolved over the years. Um, it's just, um, it's just timeless. I think it's got the greatest verse ever written. Um, it's about longing, about what it is to be human. If I was where I would be, then I'd be where I am not. Here I am where I must be, where I would be, I cannot. Um, it's it's a song that's still living, still people still cover it. I know Nick Cave did it
Yeah.
quite a few years ago. When I first came to town, they called me the Roving Jewel. Now they've changed their tune and call me Katie Cruel. It's just an amazing performance, and I love the interplay between um, Karen's voice and the violinist, the way the violin is playing with her. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name right now, but it's the same person that played on Running Dry by Neil Young. So you
Oh,
go and
really?
after you listen to Katie Cruel, go and listen to Running Dry. It's there's a W in his name, Walden or Walt. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't want to be disrespectful, but I can't I can't remember his name right now. But uh, he was making some good music with different people.
Fantastic. Paul, we put together a little playlist on Spotify to accompany this show with all the tracks that we've been discussing today. And obviously, we put some Paul Kelly music on there as well. And whilst we can now park up talking about other artists, I feel like we should be talking about Paul Kelly and what Paul Kelly's about to get stuck into. So bring me up to speed with everything that's happening, Paul.
Well, we've got a record coming out in a month today, so that's called 70, which is my age. So I'm taking a leaf from Adele's book, um, and it's we put out a record last year called Fever Long You Still. So I see it as a bit of a companion piece in a way. Um, Lots of storytelling, uh, quite a diverse collection of songs. Um, yeah, not much more to say about it, but we've already had a couple of singles out already from it. One's called Rita Wrote a Letter, which is a sequel to an earlier song of mine called How to Make Gravy. And the other single is The Body Keeps the Score, which is also the title of a book um, by Bessa van der Kolk, which is exploration into the effects of trauma and how it can be hidden um, for many years until it comes out in damaging ways.
Will there be shows to support the release of this? You're going to get back out on the road, Paul?
Uh, yeah, as far as UK goes, it probably won't be till next year, but we've got some shows early in Australia next year, and then um, we'll. I mean, over we were over there in October. Um, we played London and Manchester, and Dublin, and a few places in Europe. But yeah, we haven't had really a chance to play the songs from last year's record or this new record coming up. So hopefully we'll get an opportunity to come out there later next year.
Fantastic. Well, if you find yourself on the coast and you find yourself anywhere near Coffs Harbour, my brother runs a venue. He's been an Aussie for 20 years now, and he runs a venue called the Hoey Moey. And so, yeah, if you're
I
looking for
know it.
somewhere to play, you know the Hoey Moey?
Yeah, we played there back in the day. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
fantastic. That's my brother's place. So you find
All
yourself
right,
down there, pop in for a beer. He'd love to see you, mate.
all right. What's his name?
His name's Dan.
Dan. Okay. All right.
And Paul, if people want to keep up the speed with releases and tour dates and everything else, where's the best place to keep up the speed with all things Paul Kelly?
Instagram, Facebook, and the website. So you just go, type into Facebook Paul Kelly or type into Instagram Paul Kelly. It comes up. Paul Kelly Official is on Instagram,
Fantastic. Fantastic.
and we always keeping stuff up to date on the website as well. So
Fantastic. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk records with you today. Thank you so much for coming on, Matt. Really appreciate it.
thanks, Stu. And as Friedrich Nietzsche once said, without music, life would be a mistake.
I can't
He
add
said a
nothing
lot of
to
things.
that. I can't add nothing to that. That's a beautiful place to finish, mate. I'm going to press stop, but don't go anywhere.